First order of business is to welcome our newly elected school committee woman, Christy Manjaka. Christy, welcome to the school committee.
Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to learning from all of you.
First item on the agenda is approval of minutes. Item A, open session, and item B, the open session.
Motion made to approve both sessions.
Any questions? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item C, executive session.
Motion made to approve of the appropriate section of Rhode Island State Law.
Any questions? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We have no correspondence. No one has signed up for public comment. Item number 6, Chair will entertain a motion on the consent agenda.
Motion made to approve the consent agenda as presented.
There's a motion and a second. Any questions on the consent agenda? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 7, Superintendent's report. Mr. Goho.
Thank you, Dr. Pilata and members of the committee. So I just want to give a brief overview of item A and B, which I'm going to ask for your support to approve. So you have in your packet the job description for elementary school assistant principal, and then the contract template for the elementary school assistant principal. So this is a new position, but it is not an additional position. As you know, we have the principal of Greystone who left us in the middle of the year last year, and that position has since been filled very ably and very capably by 2 retirees, Lorraine Michella and Laurie DeSimone. So that position remains in the budget, obviously. However, we need to begin thinking about transitioning to the new Greystone school, which is going to house both the Centerdale students and the Greystone students. So my thought here is the new school with approximately 550, 560 kids, our entire preschool program, I think, would be appropriately staffed with a principal and an assistant principal. So we want to begin that transition a year in advance so that everyone can start to become familiarized with the Greystone community and obviously maintain appropriate closure for the Centerdale community. So the goal is to approve the job description in the spring, this coming spring, advertise for an assistant elementary principal. That will include an interview committee headed by Donna Hanley, currently the principal at Centerdale, who will become the new principal of the combined Greystone Centerdale school when it opens. And that committee will include also stakeholders from both school communities, both Greystone and Centerdale. And the goal would be to hire an elementary assistant principal to begin July 1 for the upcoming school year. And then Mrs. Hanley and that elementary assistant principal will be in their places beginning to transition Greystone and Centerdale to the combined school the following year. So having the elementary assistant principal on site, essentially being the person in charge of Greystone next year, with the continued assistance, I think, and mentoring of Mrs. DeSimone primarily, and also Mrs. Michella as well. And then what we would have happen is Mrs. Hanley would then intermittently throughout the year spend some time over at Greystone as well, becoming more familiar with the Greystone community, which would then have the assistant principal that we hope to hire spending time over at Centerdale. So that'll allow the 2 administrators to appropriately shepherd both schools through their last year, and then be ready when the new school is joined, and then that would be the administrative team. So I've provided to you the elementary assistant principal job description, the timeline, and the plan that we have carefully thought out to make sure that both schools are appropriately taken care of for their last year of existence, and that both administrators have experience at the Greystone site and are better prepared to greet the new Greystone community when it combines with Centerdale the following year. So item A, I would ask for approval by the school committee to approve the elementary assistant principal job description as submitted.
Are you looking?
Without objection, would the motion entertain items A and B?
Yeah, exactly. Motion to approve items A and B.
Second.
I just have a question.
Questions, Mrs. Picard?
Joe, what's the salary range? I'm sorry if I missed it. I didn't see it.
So we are in the process of gathering that information from the finance department. So we think we did talk about a range of approximately, we're going to nail it down, 108 to 113 would place that position probably slightly below the middle school assistant principals.
And just, I'm sorry, remind me again, what was the student enrollment anticipated?
Approximately 550, slightly higher. I've seen some numbers where it's slightly higher. So I'm going to say give or take 550, and again, with all of our preschool there as well.
Thank you.
That's 4-track, correct?
4-track.
Any other questions? There's motion on the floor. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item C.
All right, next item. So I do want to give the school committee an overview of this as well as future plans. So I have on the agenda a quote for new bleachers in the North Providence High School Gymnasium number 2. As everyone is aware, we have talked about with the fund balance that we have developed, trying to invest back into our facilities, one-time capital improvements, so that our students and our staff and our community can benefit from the fund balance that we currently have, but also maintaining an appropriate number in reserve. So we started that process last year. Everyone knows that we remodeled both of the gymnasiums at Birchwood and Ritchie. And as you probably have heard yourself, the response from the kids, the staff, the community, even out-of-towners who come into the gymnasiums at Birchwood and Ritchie are totally impressed with how phenomenal both of those gyms look. So we need to continue that and finish off probably the last significant capital improvement that's on the agenda that we know of. And then we need to do the same for the high school gymnasiums. So those gymnasiums have not been touched in approximately 30 years. So gym number 1, which is the main gym, does have brand new bleachers. I shouldn't say brand new. They have the same bleachers as Ritchie and Birchwood, the automatic bleachers. Gym number 1 does have, it's a smaller gym, but it has the original bleachers from at least 30 years ago. And they're the same bleachers that we had to replace at Birchwood and Ritchie because the safety component to it was a concern. So we've gotten a price from the company that provided us with the new bleachers, both in gym number 1 and Ritchie and Birchwood, to do the same at gym number 2. The good news about that is that we received word today that we submitted an application to the Rhode Island School Building Authority to get reimbursed under the health and safety program for those bleachers at our 60% approximate reimbursement rate. And we received word today that they will be reimbursed. So that's great news. So I need the committee to consider approving this invoice up to that number. It's possible we are writing some grants, some athletic-based grants, that number could be lowered by the grants that we receive. But I'm asking the committee to approve the enclosed quote for new bleachers at North Providence High School, gym number 2, up to not to exceed the number of the that's on the invoice. After that, probably next month, you will see quotes that we're in the process of getting to resurface both of the floors, and then also to probably replace the padding around both gymnasiums, with gym number 2 being the worst, and also painting, because they've not, as I said, they've not been done in 30 years. So we're figuring, maybe 100,000, 150,000 total. We should be able to do both gyms, but we are getting reimbursement on the bleachers, and we are writing athletic grants, potentially for all of those expenditures. So we feel it's a good investment that'll benefit the high school athletics and also the community as well. So I would ask for a motion or approval by the committee to approve the quote for the new bleachers as submitted.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item D.
Okay, next item is the presentation of the fiscal year 2026 budget. Ms. Casanelli and I will probably tag team that, but you have the presentation at your seat, and I'm going to go through some of the slides. Okay, so Ms. Casanelli, wait a minute, I forget, sorry, thank you. Okay, so providing you with a little bit of an overview of our projected budget requests that we will consider and then forward over to the town once you guys approve it at the February meeting. So for fiscal year 2026, we're asking for a local appropriation of $34,147,734. And when you compare that to the 2025 budget of $32,850,000, it represents an increase of $1.297 million that we will be asking the town. Now, let me just state that this is not a budget that is expanding. We're not expanding staff. We're not expanding programs. This is just to maintain what we have. And in fact, as you'll see when we start talking about things like Chromebooks, we're actually, with that, even with that increase, potentially not able to even maintain what we have. The projected state aid is $30,704,000 as compared to fiscal year 2025 of $30,312,000. So it represents an increase of $391,862. So that's not catastrophic. Some communities are actually getting a reduction, but $392,000 barely covers year-to-year expenses. And in fact, we've been told by the state that when that number was released, there was an error in the calculation. They calculated preschool students as full-time students when they're actually half-time students. And so that number is going to be reduced when they release the March number. And if I had to guess, although Ms. Casanelli is in the process of trying to figure that out exactly, it's probably about a $30,000 to $50,000 reduction of that number. Medicaid reimbursement, we're projecting a $500,000 Medicaid reimbursement compared to $700,000. Lisa, I don't know if you just want to talk about the reason for the $200,000 estimated reduction.
It's been decreasing every year. Although we did get a substantial amount in December. So I don't know whether when Copy Relay took over, I think they have a big turnover in staff. But anyway, we seem to be getting caught up on the payments. So hopefully that's going to come in higher than it has in previous years. But
Yep.
It's been getting lower and lower every year. So I felt we needed to reduce it to reflect that.
So we're really budgeting to actuals.
Yeah.
Okay. We're expecting a little bit of an increase in miscellaneous tuition, which would be our CTE programs at the high school. We are not projecting any use of our fund balance. If you recall, fiscal year 2025, we did use $400,000 of our fund balance to fund Chromebook replacements. We are not proposing doing that this year. And the housing aid reimbursement at this point, we don't have any scheduled, although this bleacher project
Right.
would add to that. So as you can see from that slide, it's a total of essentially $909,000 in terms of additional revenue that we need to seek from the municipality. Next slide. Okay. This slide, I kind of want you to kind of look from the bottom. We all know that the district has been level funded for a number of years by the municipality. And understandably, since 2017, other than the exception of 2019, 2020, we received significant state aid increases for all of those years. That occurred during the years when the state funding formula was accelerated. And we knew that that was going to be for a 3 to 5 year period of time. And then slowly those state aid increases were going to dissipate. And if you see, from 2017, 2018, we started out with a $1.8 million state aid increase. And you see it slowly decrease as you go up the scale to where we are this year at $391,000. So the justification for level funding the school department has always been, well, you're getting substantial state aid increases, so you should be able to make do with that. Well, that is no longer the case. We are not getting substantial state aid increases. And so when you talk about some of the expenses that happen year to year that we have no control over, you'll see that if we get level funded by both entities, essentially, then the school system is going to have to contract. And we can't run a deficit, obviously, by state law. One of the things I do want to point out, some information that I learned today, Mike. I hope you don't mind that I steal some of the analysis that we did this afternoon. We looked at the state appropriation going back about 10 years, which was about $16 million. It is now $31 million for the town of North Providence in education aid, which represents approximately a 90% increase of state aid over a 10-year period. The local appropriation represents, as you'll see when we show the numbers, a 1.5% increase over that same period of time. So as you see from these numbers here, that represents what we have seen from the municipality in terms of education aid. And again, understandably, as we have received substantial increases in state aid from year to year, that was the justification for the minimal funding from the town, and we've been able to make do. As you know, we had the federal money, 4 years of COVID money, ESSER money. That money is no longer available. We also had the conversion last year that we made, that the school committee approved, with transferring our healthcare provider from RIMIC to the interlocal trust, which saved us a significant amount of money. And it was essentially a state aid increase and allowed us to meet the significant gap that existed between our requested amount and the amount that we received from the town, which again was zero. So all of the COVID money is gone. It's not available for this year. And at this point, we do not see any obvious way that we can make up a $1.2 million deficit or request of educational aid from the municipality. So our ask is about 3.94% of the town, and we all know that by law, we can't ask for more than 4%. So even the 3.94%, we're not comfortable with asking the municipality for that right up to the cap. But the circumstances have put us in this position where we have to ask for it in order to maintain what we have.
I have a question.
Yes, Dr.
I have a
Bob.
question on that slide. So if we do the math, the town's contribution, 300,000 and 200,000, which is 500,000 over a 9-year period. The town increased its budget to us approximately $55,000 a year. Is that correct? Approximately?
If you
Give us an average of $55,000 a year over a 9-year period. So we've managed to balance our budgets all these years because of a couple of factors. One you alluded to, which was the amount of federal dollars that came into the district and the amount of state aid that has come into the district. And through the efforts of the administration, wrote and received approximately $5 million in grants over the last 57 years. And that's how we've been able to manage our budget. So going forward, the federal money is no longer going to be available. And state aid may not be available at this point. So I think we really need to make a case to the town that they have to take a strong look at their contribution to the school department. Because I think as I go through this budget template, I also noticed that over the last several years, we haven't increased staff. So our budget is not increasing because we've increased our staff. It's a natural order of things that things go up. So I just want to make that point so people understand that and the general public understands that in terms of what our ask for is from the town. We may not get the $1.2 million, but we certainly need to get something from the town to balance the budget this year. We're not going to purposely create a deficit when we don't have the funding. And we'll do whatever we have to do on our side of the ledger to balance the budgeting. But I think it just should be known that town's appropriation over the last multiple years has really been picked up by the state and federal government and grants that we've written. Mr. Picard.
I completely agree with you. I also think it would be important to note when we go to the town council and to discuss the budget that we talk about the inflation rate in New England, which is 3.3%, that we talk about that in the nation, it's 2.9%. And if we look back at last year, it was 3%, the year prior, 4.9, FY23, 8%. So I think if we go back the last 10 years about the rate of inflation compared to the increases in our budget, you will see that not only have we done an excellent job being fiscally responsible, but we are one of the few districts that are getting increased enrollment and are asked to do more. And as we all know, we have seen more dollars from the state and federal government, and if not, our local dollars are not comparable to what they need to be based on the needs of our district. So I think going through the annual inflation rate, I'm happy to share, I have the document if you want it, but is going to be important for the town council to understand.
Okay, Mr. Go, thank you.
A couple other pieces I would add. We are actually, oh, Mr. De Silva?
Quick question.
I'm sorry, Mr.
Sorry.
DeSilva.
So the state aid money is 31 mil approximately? How much of that is earmarked? Percent?
So,
Because I said for years, the state gets money to pay their bills.
so Attorney Scungio's office has worked with the Northwest Schools Consortium to put together a document that shows, which we haven't released yet, but we have received from you, which shows all of the unfunded state and federal mandates.
Right.
So we're going to share that with the committee as we move through the budget process. But yeah, you probably do, right?
Mr. Scott did a wonderful job at his law firm, so I have a link to it on my budget FAQ for my district. Happy to
It's
send it.
quite comprehensive. About 13
Compliments
pages.
of North Providence and Lincoln, right?
Right, actually, I think you're right. Just a couple of quick points to Dr. Pilata's point. We've actually reduced staff. When you look at the paraprofessionals on the special education side and the school building side, we're down about 15 to 20 paraprofessionals, if not more, from when we first took over. And then students and out of district placements. That was like 72, 74. We're hovering around 56, 55. So we've significantly lowered those costs. Well, lowered the numbers, but the costs have not gone down because those private schools, those tuitions, we're at the whim of what they decide to charge, and they just randomly, there's a demand, there's fewer schools, and so we've done our part to lower the numbers, but we've also used the federal dollars to create infrastructure to help us save dollars. We didn't use federal dollars to add staff. We didn't use federal dollars to create ongoing expenses. We actually used the federal dollars to lower ongoing expenses, and that is evident in the elementary programs that we created, K through 2 and 3 through 5, for our highly specialized classrooms, which allowed us to bring more kids back into the district and lower those out-of-district numbers. And the federal dollars helped fund the salaries to get that started. So kudos to you.
Any other comments? Okay.
And then the last piece that you'll hear is, well, the school department doesn't need money because they have a fund balance. And again, we all know sound fiscal management, and I'll say that again, sound fiscal management and our own policies and law. You cannot use fund balance to fund operating expenses. The fund balance is for one-time, non-recurring capital expenses, not to fund an operating budget. Because when you do that, you create a structural deficit. So we are going to hear that. So I just want everybody to be prepared. You have a fund balance, you don't need money. We are going to hear that. So we just need to be on the same page that you can't use fund balance to fund your operating budget.
Chair? May I?
Yeah,
Just to add that, thank you, Joe, for saying that. I also think when we go to the town council, it would be in our best interest to share that what the auditor's recommendation is. I know our auditors, just like I know your auditor would say, that typically you want the 10% of what would your operating costs be, and they've recommended that we increase our fund balance to 10 to 15%. I thought they were going to have a heart attack. Ours is the range of 2 to 4%, which basically they've said we're one catastrophe away from of having zero fund balance. So I think also including that in the town council's their edification would be helpful.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next slide. Just to show some enrollment data, as Mrs. Picard alluded to, we are very fortunate. The trend across the state is declining enrollment. There are very few communities in the state that are showing a stable and certainly not a growing enrollment. So although the increase is projected to be about 14 students, that is different from the trend across the rest of the state. Our MLL population, which RIDE has said North Providence is one of the fastest growing communities in the state in terms of multilingual learners in North Providence, is up to 455 students. We are doing a good job with Mrs. Seitzinger and the MLL coordinator and our teachers of exiting more students into the out of through the appropriate standardized testing. So we have decreased from 486 to 455, but still, when I became superintendent, I believe we were at 70. And we are, as you know, a high incidence district. But the commissioner told me, and in all of their presentations, when we went to the RIDE accountability meeting, they specifically cited North Providence and a couple other communities as an astounding increase in MLL population. Okay, next slide. As Dr. Pilata mentioned, FTEs, we're not projecting any increase at all. And the numbers are exactly the same, and they have been over a significant number of years. Prior to COVID, in order to close these budgets, we had begun the process of contracting the district and contracting staff. We had lost teachers, itinerants, closed libraries. Then COVID hit and we had the influx of federal funds and we were able to stop that. And we certainly don't want those days to start repeating as well. Next slide. Some of the projected areas of increases, obviously the contractual salary increases for all employees, that would be certified and non-certified, and the contractual steps in raises of 2 new contracts and one that we are in the middle of negotiating. That represents $913,000. Fringe benefits, along with that, along with the increased salaries, comes increased fringe benefit costs, $293,000, and other operational expenses. So I don't know if, Lisa, if you can just give
That's just budget-wide, all of the other.
Yeah, so we know
outside
transportation.
services, transportation.
Transportation is about a 3%.
things like maintenance, things like that. Everything, supplies, everything's gone up.
Healthcare,
Right.
transportation.
And that's with making the cuts that you'll see on the other slides.
Yep.
And that's being generous. It's probably
Okay,
a
yep.
lot more than that.
Next slide. So in order to, we're not happy coming out with a requested increase of the town close to the cap. And so we really went through what were our original projected needs. And from what you see tonight, we have already eliminated $1.1 million from what we thought we needed. So we've reduced the contracted nursing line by $416,000. When I say reduced it, our original request, we made these cuts to get to the number that you see tonight. $416,000 in contracted nursing, maintenance $57,000, out of district special ed tuition, we eliminated $250,000. That line was cut by $420,000 in fiscal year 25 to meet the budget. And then, as I mentioned, the Chromebook replacements, we had to take them out of the request to get below 4%. And right now, that $420,000 for Chromebook replacements is not in the budget. And these are the areas where we have seen projected operating expenses will likely increase. Lisa, I don't know if you want to go through some of them.
Sure. These are areas that have been continuing to increase, and we always seem to have to make some cuts to manage our budget, but they continue to increase, and I feel like we normally can't even really budget correctly for these expenses, but we'll just go through them really quick. And I mentioned contract nursing, the increase I had in there, we had to cut it down. That continues to go up because we have to backfill for nursing, behavior specialists, and paraprofessionals. And as we said, Joe had mentioned that the agencies are charging more money. We're kind of at their mercy. I think everybody in other districts is feeling that you just can't fill these positions. So it's a necessary expense, but unfortunately it's too high. Maintenance and repairs, everything has gone up substantially. We see it even with our contracts that we have, the contractors we're using. So that I had to cut already. I still show an increase, but I had to cut it further. Out of district tuitions, as Mr. Goho mentioned, we're at the mercy of what they charge. We don't have any increase in children going out of district, but the costs have gone up substantially. And then transportation, we just renewed the contract with Durham, so this just shows that it's a modest increase, really. they didn't really go up too substantial, but, so, and that had to be cut, so that should have been higher also, but we're hoping statewide maybe we'll straighten out and they'll come
Yeah,
in
so just a
little
couple
lower,
of
so.
pieces. The last piece about transportation, I'm gonna have a resolution before you, probably, at one of our next meetings. There's talk of the state legislature about revamping, statewide transportation, both for private school costs and, routes that don't make sense and regionalization, zones that don't make sense. So, Mario Perino, has assisted in developing a template resolution that has made its way to the League of Cities and Towns and to the School Committee Association. A number of districts have begun to pass it, so I'm gonna have it on an agenda for us to pass as well, to communicate to our state delegation that anything they can do to re-examine the statewide transportation piece would help us. And again, I did want to point out the out-of-district tuition line, as Lisa wrote there, North Providence has seen substantial increases to the cost of sending students out of district, and that has happened while we have reduced numbers on our end. So I don't want, no one can come out and say, well, the district isn't doing what it needs to do to reduce those costs. We've built programs, we've succeeded in reducing the numbers by 15 kids, and yet we still are seeing substantial increases. Next slide. Again, we talked about technology hardware. As you know, as a result of the pandemic, we became a one-to-one district. Every student in the district now has a device for school use as well as for distance learning. Each device has a useful life of 5 years. In order to remain a one-to-one district, we would need to replace 1,000 Chromebooks every year. And the cost for doing this for the upcoming school year is $420,000. And last year we used $400,000 of our fund balance. So we can't continue to do that. So we have to decide how we're going to continue with Chromebooks in terms of, in my opinion, the elementary kids would, in my opinion, come first. And then more of our older kids have their own devices. Not every family can afford them. So we have to maybe potentially find how we work with those families to provide them if they can't afford them. But most kids prefer at the secondary level using their own devices anyway. So that is a conversation that we'll have further as we move along through the budget process. Next slide.
No, that,
Okay. So we will approve or recommend a budget to be sent over to the town at the February school committee meeting. I would like to ask the committee to have a budget workshop next Wednesday, February 5th, preferably at around 5:30. We can have an early meeting at 5:30 if that works. So that would be our plan. And I know, Lisa, you have, whenever we do have that budget workshop, you have some requests that you would like to make of the committee members or some timelines that you would like to make them aware. So our thought is to have that workshop next Wednesday, get input from the school committee, and then have a good full 2 weeks before the February meeting, which is when we would theoretically ask the school committee to approve the budget. And we have February vacation in between that, so we would like to have the meeting sooner rather than later, next Wednesday.
Thank you, Mr. Goho. Thank you, Mrs. Casanelli. So as Mr. Goho mentioned, next Wednesday, February 5th at 5:30, we will reconvene, have the budget workshop. Committee members at that time will have opportunity to have input into the budget, make any recommendations, and then we'll vote on the budget at our February meeting and forward it to the town. Any questions or comments on that? Okay. Thank you very much. Item 10, new business. Mr. Goho.
Thank you, Dr. Pilata. So the first item I would ask approval by the committee of a new policy regarding artificial intelligence, which includes a policy and a protocol. As we know, artificial intelligence is a relatively new phenomenon that is posing all kinds of challenges and questions and new scenarios in education and across all sectors. We recognize that this is a work in progress. The policy and the protocol that is included in your packet is a template that Attorney Scungio's office has been working with and recommending to his districts to have in place as a starting point. My recommendation would be to approve this policy and the protocol effective for the next school year, effective for the 2025-2026 school year, so that we can spend the remainder of this year and the summer and the beginning of next year appropriately scaffolding the district, training our staff, and ramping up for what we hope would be an effective implementation of this policy. So I have David McNally, our data director here, who has worked with Louise and a number of teachers and administrators and the State Technology Association and Ben's office on the development of this policy. So any questions or concerns that might arise, they can certainly answer. But I'm just going to ask Attorney Scungio to just give us an overview in terms of, from a legal perspective, why you are recommending this policy to your districts and why at this point you feel it's an appropriate policy to begin to implement.
Sure, it's becoming apparent to anyone who pays attention to national and local events that AI is going to be a significant part of not only teaching and learning going forward, but also part of business, and it's going to be imbued in essentially every aspect of our life. The other really important point that everybody should recognize is that the nature and the pervasiveness of artificial intelligence and the extent of its penetration into our lives is not only going to be profound, but it's changing virtually every single day at this point. And it's developing. If anyone has been recently paying attention to the new artificial intelligence open platform from China, DeepSeek, the impact that it had on all our major U.S. companies dealing with artificial intelligence, and the recent plunge way over 4% of NASDAQ when that hit the market on Monday, and then that company was essentially boarded in further propagating its program because it was being attacked in the cybersecurity area. You can tell that there's going to be a lot of changes. They're going to come quickly and they're going to continue. So what our office tried to do is get the most recent concepts regarding the use of artificial intelligence and build a policy that's intended to be modified over time as the area is going to be modified over time. So we have a platform to start to build from. And what most of the districts are doing that we've given this to is they're utilizing this as a first step with an understanding that moving forward as AI changes, that this policy and subsequently the protocol will have to change as well. So the policy right now is intended to recognize the concept that artificial intelligence tools are going to be used in our school, and they can be misused in our school. So it's intended to address the issues of academic integrity, prevent plagiarism and cheating, and also enable teachers to start to consider how they can use AI as a teaching and learning tool, and how students can start to use AI in an appropriate and constructive manner, because they will be using AI as a tool as they move forward in their lives today. So this is our first attempt to be able to do that with an understanding that this policy will probably have to be revisited until the dust settles in this area every single year.
Did RIDE provide any guidance on this?
No, not yet.
Thank you.
So I sent my concerns to the administration. I'm glad it's not starting till next year. With that being said, I don't think there's a rush for us to approve tonight. I have a few suggestions that I'd like to share, and I'd love to have people's perception. As I do, I understand the legal point of view, and I agree with Ben. This is something that we all have to discuss. However, it's new for the educators and the students, and I want to be mindful of that. While legal has their role, administration has our role, and then we're advocating for our students and our educators as well. So one of the things I had mentioned was transparency in the AI use. I think we need a little bit more clarification in the policy. My suggestion, and again, open to feedback and discussion from the committee, my suggestion was students will be informed about how AI tools are used and their role in evaluating academic integrity. Faculty must clearly communicate that AI detection flags are not conclusive evidence of misconduct, but indicators requiring further review. I've also recommended to the administration human review required. Any flagged content must be compared to the student's previous work, writing style, and level of academic performance. Some of this you could put in policy or protocol, but I do, for this part, but I do think we have some time to talk about it more. The other thing was faculty must discuss flag concerns with the student before reaching any conclusions. Again, I think that about their due process, I think has to be addressed so that we're clear. I mean, we all know that Siri is AI. It's available, and I want to make sure that we're not putting the cart before the horse. I agree with Ben. I think we need a baseline, and I think it needs an annual review. But I also think that we're missing some key components. And because we're not starting to next year, there's nothing from us doing our due diligence and doing like we've done in the past, first read, second read, and then an approval, just to make sure that we've had our time, especially since it's not going into effect until next year. The other thing was, I think we need to think about the appeals process for this, that students have the right to appeal and their families any determination of plagiarism made using AI tools, and appeals will include a review by a neutral third party who assesses the flagged content, because like Joe said, the infrastructure is not in place yet. So I think we have to create some safeguards for educators and teachers, so we're not putting them in a predicament where we're falsely accusing our students. But those are some of my suggestions. I'm happy to have feedback, conversation, and discussion on it. But I think this is a great conversation and topic to have, and I'm glad that we're talking about it.
So, Mr. McNally, Mrs. Picard reiterated some of the information that was in her email that I had sent over to you, so I don't know if you want to provide some feedback back to her and to the rest of the committee regarding those particular points.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for your suggestions. They're really great ideas. We have been looking at that stuff. We do plan to evolve in that area. The the protocol kind of aligns it to how we're dealing with plagiarism now. So kind of the same concepts of taking our plagiarism policies and procedures and how we act students, how we enact that with the students now will be applied to the AI. So we're looking at all those areas. We're going to continue to work forward and refine in those areas. And we think it's just as important as what we are recommending.
So would you be, are you in favor of doing that first read, second read, so that we have opportunities to add and then review?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Are you in favor of us taking our time, since it's not starting till next year, to do a first read and a second read, and then approving after we have a couple of bites at that apple to make sure that we all do our due diligence?
My recommendation is to move forward, as Ben has suggested. It does have legal ramifications. I kind of agree with that. So my suggestion is to use this as a starting point so that we can align all those other documents and all those other policies and trainings and procedures to the base that we have.
So what's the rush tonight if it's not being started till September?
It just buys us, we have time. We have plenty of time to do that work, but we don't want to have nothing, because I think it's more important to have something than the silence.
Am I misunderstanding what you said?
No, so what I would say is the school committee bylaws do allow the committee to approve a policy effective immediately, first read, or take the step of a first read and a second read. So approving it tonight doesn't really protect us because it's not in effect until next year. So the question would be, if we did a first read, based on the feedback that we've gotten and that you've gotten, would there be any modifications, additions that you would make to the policy for the second read? And if there are, then it would make sense to have a second read.
It changes all the time, so I still feel that we should put something in place as a start, so we can, as we work on all those other components, we can align it to a policy that we know we already have.
Right, but what I heard Mr. Goer say was that we're not starting until next year. So, I mean, with all due respect, you're the IT director, and I'm also thinking about the education and student lens. This is in the classrooms. I have a child in the school, and I think we have to be mindful of the fact that I think rushing through a policy that is, like Ben said, it's tenuous and the dust hasn't settled, when we have time before it begins to ensure that, like, for example, how many school improvement teams weighed in and what was feedback? I'd love to know that. So I have some other things. I just want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence. I don't think this is something that we should do tonight. Again, I am one vote, but I feel very concerned when we put something through without just taking the time, when there's no harm in taking the time, because we're not going to do this until September anyway.
Right. So let me just add, I have no problem because the policy would not become effective until next year. There's no downside to putting it back on the agenda for approval at the February meeting. We don't have to approve it right now because it won't take effect right now. But what I do want the committee to know and the public to know, and I'm going to turn this over to Mrs. Seitzinger, if you can talk about the due diligence that has been done till this point and who has weighed in, who has vetted it. There may be more that we need to do. And like I said, I have no problem with a second read, but we don't bring policies before the committee that haven't had a substantial amount of vetting and due process. So
Thank you,
regarding
Mr.
regarding this, I just want you to just inform the committee in terms of
Yes,
who's
of course.
looked at this.
Yeah, and I think I explained this too, but we can explain that we have a technology committee, first of all, in the district, as you know. And Mrs. Picard was actually on in the past. So it went through before that committee, also through our legal counsel, also through, I attended an ISTE expert conference at ASCD nationally and spent a whole day on AI and got great information. I also asked her for policies and examples of policies that she had through ISTE, which is the National Technology Association. So that was great information. We also vetted it through other districts. We vetted it through the tech team. It was sent to all the schools, the principals to vet through their teachers, and we did get feedback. So, which was excellent, and we did take that feedback seriously. So,
My question was about the school improvement teams. What was
well
that?
through the
Because
teacher.
it wasn't available on minutes, and I didn't see it on agendas. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah. So I can't speak to that, but it was sent to the school committees and asked for input. Did I miss anything? I don't think
We
so.
asked them if it's districts as well to share what they had. So we looked at that. We did multiple iterations with Ben's office back and forth a lot for several months back and forth. So it wasn't something we just did.
No, very serious. But I just wanted to say too, I think that teachers are looking for some basic guidance to have something in place. The teachers that I've spoken to just wanted to make sure that they didn't want to penalize students for using AI because we wanted to see it as an augmentative, supportive tool, as I think Ben alluded to. So I think whatever we decide tonight, I think it was important for us to have something in place. And we know many districts don't have something in place. So we wanted to try to provide some guidance to our district.
Yeah, so I would have no problem at all seeing that it won't take effect until next year, saying there's no reason to rush through it. Let's put it back on the February agenda. But I do want everybody to know the process that has occurred to.
I'd like to make a motion to make this a first read so that we put on next month's agenda for a second read.
What would change at the February meeting?
I think, well, I gave 3 suggestions tonight that I'd like to be reviewed with, shared with the tech team, shared with the school improvement teams, and get additional feedback. That's part of the responsibility.
So the original recommendation was to move forward with an approval. So the committee has the option of approval, denying, or tabling.
I'm sorry, who gave,
any-
where was there an approval of an original? There was no recommendation for immediate
So the
approval.
recommendation from the administration.
Mr.
came to
Goho
us
just
to
said he didn't
approve.
mind. There was no hurry.
Excuse me. The recommendation came to us to approve. Superintendent may have changed his opinion on that. I'm telling the full committee that we have 3 options: approve, deny, or table, and come back next month. So there needs to be a motion
I made a motion.
to recommend one of those 3 options to move off this agenda item. Mike?
I'll repeat my motion.
You made a
Yes.
You made a motion?
I did.
Okay, we just repeat it.
No problem. I made a motion to make this a first read so that we can move it to a second read for our next agenda. To be able to put it, like I said, I have suggestions. Somebody made one of my suggestions. If there's a discussion, happy to have some additional conversation. But I do think because it's not beginning right now, just like our superintendent said, we're not in a rush. This can be used as a guideline to be able to look at other policies because it's not started. And then we do a second read on our next month's agenda and possibly approve it next month.
This side of the table can't even hear what you're saying. So just press the minus button.
Yeah, so
No, not table.
my recommendation was to approve the policy effective next year. And that could be either in the form of an immediate approval or a first read approval.
Correct.
Okay, so you have that? So the motion is to have it as a first read. Okay. I know. Is there a second to that motion? Okay, hearing none, the motion is denied. Is there any additional motions?
It appears to me the original intent was to have this discussed by the school department going forward and get all the stakeholders together. So my motion is to approve it as presented.
Okay, so there's a motion on the floor to approve. Is there a second to that motion? Second by Mr. Corsini. Any questions on the motion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor? I'm sorry. Yeah.
Don't be sorry, I'm working on technology.
Sure.
I'm sorry if I'm late with the questions. The audio was challenging. So, Mrs. Picard, when you first presented your recommendations, I don't know that I completely understood what they were. If you don't mind just.
No, I don't mind at all. Thank you for asking. So, three of our suggestions I think that would be helpful was transparency in the AI use. So students will be informed about how AI tools, is the volume better? How AI tools are used and their role in evaluating academic integrity. Faculty must clearly communicate that AI detection flags are not conclusive evidence of misconduct, but indicators requiring further review. That was one of my suggestions. The next one was the human review required, which we may want to think about protocol versus policy. Any flagged content must be compared to the student's previous work, writing style, and level of academic performance. Faculty must discuss flagged concerns with the student before reaching any conclusions. The appeals process, that the students have the right to appeal. I'm sorry, there's somebody talking. Students have the right to appeal any determination of plagiarism made using AI tools. Appeals will include a review by a neutral third party who assess the flagged content in context. I understand it's a new topic. My thinking is it doesn't harm us by having a further discussion to be able to review it and make sure that we're all starting, especially since we're not starting this policy in September. So I appreciate Mr. Goho's information, but again, I think that as a parent, we have our due diligence, and may not affect people here in the audience. It will impact my child and other children, and I take that very seriously.
As do we all, whether we have children in the school system or who've graduated from the school system. And there's a motion and a second on the table, so I say let's move the question.
Okay, so there was a motion and a second. Just to kind of summarize this very good conversation, and correct me if I'm wrong, you had a committee put this policy together, vetted by legal counsel. So with Mrs. Picard's questions, if she submitted those questions, you would have to take those back to the committee and make some decisions. If I'm trying to implement a protocol.
Absolutely, and we did figure great feedback, but I think what we need to do is work on the protocol more than the actual policy. The policy, as it stands, is we think in good standing. It's, I don't know, that would be more at the school level. We do have some community members on our district tech team, but we can, to your point about sit teams, we understand that. So we can get more feedback, but I think the protocol piece is going to be more to answer the questions and the feedback that you mentioned, which we support. We just, again, it's a work in progress, so we do want to work more on the protocol. We understand that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. The whole impetus that we've been operating under recently is really taking a look at separating policy and protocol, having our policies be more global, and then the protocol, which is internal, can change at any time.
Yeah.
The policy is the more global statement. So the protocol can change as we move through this process the remainder of the school year, in the summer, in the beginning of the school year, as we begin ramping up the district.
Yeah, and I
So
think
we're showing
we
the
think
school
it will.
committee, the protocol because it is new. But technically, really the policy that they're responsible for, and then the protocol we develop and modify and revise internally. So that work will continue from
Mhm.
tonight right on through the remainder of the school year.
It'll probably be constantly evolving, as we know, because of the field. But
So, I'm sorry. Um, I would suggest, excuse me, because this is a fluid document, that if this gets approved tonight and there's a motion on the floor, I'll ask for the vote. This gets approved tonight, going forward, this can be changed at any time. Given the information that comes to us, either through legal counsel or the administration, any one of us, the language could be adjusted and changed because it is going to be a fluid document. We have plenty of time to make that happen because it's not going to be implemented until September of '25. Okay, any other comments?
Yes, one, I think all our protocols are subject and fluid to change, not just this. So that's why it's important to approve it and move forward.
All right, there's a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries.
Okay, next item on the agenda, I would request approval by the committee of another new policy, which is the display of materials on school property, which is the policy and the protocol. This will just ensure that all of the displays that we have in our classrooms, in our schools, on our websites, anything that we distribute to the public, expose our students to, are aligned to the academic and social emotional goals and the curriculum of the district. We had no policy governing that. Again, worked with Attorney Scungio's office with some issues that have arisen over the last couple of years, and we feel that this policy puts us in a better position to address those issues to ensure that materials are aligned to our curriculum and our district goals.
Motion made to approve.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Next item on the agenda, I would request approval of the enclosed student grade appeal policy, which is a new policy.
Motion made to approve.
So,
Yeah, a motion from Rod.
okay, there's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion?
Second. Questions or comments?
So
Mrs. Picard?
I would like to take a look at the number of days that we think about with, so for the principal, so it says that within 5 school days of a teacher meeting, after that, it goes into, if the principal denies and it's appealed to the superintendent, they have 3 days. I just like it to mirror the 5 days that's above.
What page?
It's page 2 on step 3.
Page 2?
Page 2, step 3.
Yeah.
So be consistent with the
That
5
was your
days at
Yes.
both levels. I would agree with that.
Picard, what's your recommendation?
So at the step 2, it says principal within 5 school days of the appeal. You have to be able to respond in written appeal. I'm just requesting to make it consistent so it's not confusing to families that the step 3 also be 5 school days.
So the timelines would be consistent at both levels of 5 days. Well, we have no objection to that.
Oh, okay.
We can make that amendment.
Thank you.
Was there a motion?
We have a motion.
Yes,
and a second.
motion by Mrs. De Silva, and I think seconded by Ms. Majak.
With the correction or addition.
That would be an internal,
Yes,
that would be an internal correction.
correct.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Next item is I would request approval by the committee of the updated enclosed grading policy and protocol.
Motion made to approve.
Just code?
I don't know.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next.
Next item on the agenda, I would request approval of the revised and updated district dress code policy. This policy has been in progress with work from the high school principal and administration, middle school as well, and input from the elementary principals and their staff and their parents. This policy language reflects how the previous policy, has been implemented at the school level. And so now the language of the policy will match and mirror the practical application of how it has been implemented anyway, which we feel has been with a great deal of common sense. So I would request a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
There's a motion and a second. Any questions or comments on the dress code policy?
No, I just appreciate.
Mrs. Picard?
How's it now, Ben? Is it better? Okay. I appreciate the due diligence with the dress code. Thank you so much. Excellent work.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, next item on the agenda is I would request approval by the committee of the enclosed MOU with Hazel Health. Just a little bit of background on Hazel Health. This is a state initiative through the Department of Education. It provides 1 year, 1 calendar year of funding for virtual telehealth for mental health for our students, which would be implemented during the school day and or at home.
So moves. Thank you so much. I think this is an excellent idea.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and second. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, and thank you, Cindy and Attorney Scungio for your office for getting this over the finish line. I know there were a lot of issues that arose last minute, so thank you for that. Next item is I would request approval by the committee of the enclosed high school yearbook bid as submitted.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and second. Questions? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Goho. Next item on the agenda, item number 11, approval of bills.
So moved.
Motion and a second. Any questions on the bills? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 12, use of property requests. Motion made, seconded. Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 13, request to address the committee. Mrs. Boardman has withdrawn her request. She may submit that request next month. Item 14, we have no pending business. Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion made and second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. We will reconvene on February 5th at 5:30 here in the library.